From drones in the skies to targeted missile launches on the ground, the war in Ukraine is heavily dependent on technology.
The rise of drones and autonomous systems and the electronic warfare systems that combat them, the battle for the airwaves is just as fierce as the battle on the ground. As a result, position, navigation, and timing systems like GPS are all but unusable on the front lines of modern conflict.
Are you kidding? It's incredibly urgent. What we're seeing in Ukraine and what we're seeing in the development of China's capabilities, it's very urgent, both on the alternative side and on the resilient side.
That's why the Space Force just created a new program to create a fully redundant GPS constellation.
There is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. GPS alone is responsible for about $1.4 trillion in economic activity. It intersects with finance, logistics, agriculture, but these space-based systems really are becoming increasingly vulnerable to jamming, to spoofing, from warfare-related interference that's impacting areas in Europe and the Middle East, to criminals using cheap jammers to steal cargo and evade tracking. China's Baidu 3 system achieved full global coverage of 45 low Earth orbit satellites back in 2020, and they have a planned constellation in 2027 that will bring significantly greater capabilities online. Baidu is already considered to be superior to GPS in several key areas. There's a risk that China could far surpass the United States in this technological area. So Brian, I want to shift to you. Brian is CEO of a company called Xona. Help us understand what Xona is working on and the immediate benefit that your capabilities provide relative to where GPS is today.
So what we're building at Xona is kind of like a Starlink of GPS. So it's a bunch of small satellites in low Earth orbit and dedicated to providing very high performance satellite navigation capabilities. How do you provide these vehicles with the very reliable centimeter accuracy they need for you to be able to trust taking your hands off the wheel and making sure the thing is still centered in its lane? And how do you do that anywhere on the planet and in any environment, even if the car is covered in snow or dirt or mosquitoes or anything else that still happens and can mess with cameras and LiDAR systems? And in order to do that, you need something that is available, affordable, and standardized. And what we found is that if you're going to make something that can reach all of these things, you can't require new hardware to be added. That as soon as you require new hardware to be added to the device, the affordability side certainly starts to disappear. So we designed our entire system around the idea that you could actually firmware or software update a GPS receiver to be able to drive really high performance into it. And what we found is that if you can actually provide that level of capability into, there's something like 7 billion GPS chips on the planet today. There's soon going to be more GPS devices than people. We would solve a problem not just with the automotive world, but with mobile phones, with IoT devices, with agriculture, with all sorts of things that we've never even thought of, including a lot within the government side of things. If the government really embraces the idea of navigation as a service, which has just never been available before. And a lot of what's going to dictate who wins the race that we're in right now is which government can really embrace and leverage the power of their commercial markets and just their innovation in the commercial world to drive that forward.
There are many alternative approaches to GPS. Can you help us understand what Zephyr is building and the capabilities it would unlock for the US government?
Similar to Brian making the satellites more resilient, we think a lot about making the receivers more resilient. And specifically kind of going to those 7 billion receivers, most of those receivers are low-end commodity chips. And how do we enable that massive network of devices to be more resilient to disturbance? So that's one of the dirty secrets to alt PNT is that for the vast majority of alt PNT systems to work is it needs an initial known coordinate. And then it's managing the error once you lose GPS after having that initial known coordinate, but you still need a starting point, right? And there aren't many things out there other than GPS and give you a highly precise last known or initial known coordinate. And so a lot of what we do is applying techniques to those devices to make the reception of that signal more resilient to disturbance. The single phone you have in your pocket now can only see so many satellites, maybe 20, 30, up to 40 possibly. But especially in a place like New York where all these buildings are occluding it, functionally jamming that signal, is there's only so many satellites you can see. And so what we do is we start getting measurements from multiple devices. And so while our devices right now may be occluded by these buildings heavily, there's a whole bunch of people in Central Park that are getting great line of sight to their satellites and getting really good measurements. And kind of in the process of doing this was a group from Ukraine reached out and said, hey, we see that y'all are making the positioning more resilient to disturbances. We were wondering if that might help with the Russian jamming. We had no clue whether it would or not, but we were really interested in seeing if we could help out. So we sent over multiple phones and distributed them out along the front lines of Ukraine. And we did find that it made it more resilient to Russian jamming. But the other cool thing that we discovered in the process of doing that is, since you have this distributed network of devices, that it's picking up measurements from all along that front line. And as it picked up those measurements, it could figure out where the jammers were and where the area that was being jammed. Again, these things are so tightly coupled. I think a lot of times in the marketing and the buzz, we kind of look at these things as, oh, it's GPS or not GPS, and we don't need it. But the reality we find is that they're really tightly coupled together and interdependent.
I have a chart that I want to pull up. If you want to just sort of frame this for us, it's really a theory of long history of technology development.
Yeah, so we've been calling this Reed's Law, but it's kind of following like a Moore's Law of navigation to an extent. We have another version internally that you actually start to put different modes of transportation across it. If you look at back in the celestial navigation days, you're traveling by ship. And at that point, people are probably on the ship, okay, I got to know where I am within kilometers or so. Like, this is great. Why would I ever need to know where I am within hundreds of meters or meters? And then as you get into the long wave radio and the radio navigation, you're starting to move into aerial. It's okay, if I know where I am to within 100 meters, why would I ever need better accuracy than that? And then you start to move, the original paper from aerospace was in 1966. And at that point, okay, we need to get to within single digit meters. Those things make a pretty big hole. Why would we need to get any better accuracy? Like, why would we need centimeter accuracy to put a crater in the ground? Keep going forward and you get into the automotive days. If GPS can tell me what road I'm on, why would I ever need better accuracy? And sure enough, advanced to where we are now it's okay, well, take your hands off the wheel. The car's got to know not just what lane it's in, but if it's in the center of the lane. Just continuous technology advancements. And we already have customers asking us for millimeters, going to sub-centimeter. One example that stuck with me in talking to a construction customer is I'm paving 100 miles of 4-lane highway. And the tolerance on how thick I can put that blacktop down is 3 inches plus or minus a couple centimeters. And so if I can knock off 1 centimeter times 4 lanes times 100 miles, it's saving millions of dollars of blacktop. And so there's just simple things, the same way that GPS wasn't designed to tell a taxi where it's at, but without it, Uber doesn't exist, Lyft doesn't exist, DoorDash, none of these things exist, that when you start to make these high performance capabilities available into the world, it's pretty exciting to see what the next generation of having just highly available, high accuracy is going to unlock.
A critical part of understanding where you are, what you're looking at, and how you're interacting with the real world is positioning. Those investors realize the ability to bridge that gap between the two. We definitely see more interest begin to grow, whereas before people kind of saw it as, oh, this thing we take for granted, this thing we get for free, right? The blue dot gets close enough on my map that I can look up and see that, oh, there's the Starbucks, and I can figure out the last little bit. If it's 5 meters off or 10 meters off, it's not a big deal. But increasingly, as we do this shift into autonomy, we do this shift into AI, investor markets are realizing how important this bridge between positioning and real-world enablement of AI and autonomy are to get the two things to come together.